Hey y'all, what up? It's Ashlyn here. Yes, my hair is done. I got it done again. I feel great about it. So there's that. I apologize, my cat is getting into stuff. You're not gonna listen, go. Okay, so I picked up these couple little double-sided bookmarks from my library. I didn't show these last time, but I have more bookmarks, which I don't need any more bookmarks, honestly. But I figured we could read a chapter each and see if I'm going to continue with the book or not. Thought that would be kind of fun. Especially considering some of these are newer-ish. This one's 2023. This one is... This one's 2024. This one is 2023. This one is 2005. Jesus. This one is 2020. And this one I'm not going to read to you because this one is literally this, which I'm going to read this today. I think I'm going to complete it too. So we have a 2005, a 2020, a 2020, 2023s, and a 2024. So, with that being said, we'll go ahead and get started. I'll tell you my thoughts about the cover so far, if I feel like I'm going to like it or not, and if I'm right. So, let's read Hello, It's Me by Wendy Markham. It says, I'm not even going to read the back. It's kind of pointless because I've already read the back in the other video for this. This book is dedicated to the 9/11 widows and widowers in solemn memory of their lost loved ones and with love and gratitude to Mark, Morgan, and Brody. Oh. That's so weird. Okay, so this is it's got a prologue, so we'll do the prologue. "33 pages for a chapter. I don't even know if I'm gonna read this. But we'll try. Okay. My trusty dusty circle bottle. My raspberry tea flavor. Alright. Hey, you've reached Andre. You know what to do. Wait for the beep and don't forget to leave your number. Clutching the phone between her shoulder and her ear, Annie Harlow dabbed some hot glue onto the straw wreath frame she's working on. The seashell wreath has a brilliant idea, if she does think so herself. Tomorrow she'll take the kids back down to the Bay Beach with bigger buckets and get... Beep! Hey babe, it's your lovely wife. Annie plops a sun-bleached oyster shell into the glue. Where the heck are you? I made dinner and I'm waiting for you, so get your butt home before I eat without you. I fed the kids already. We were on the beach all day and I'm starving to death. Love you. Her stomach punctuating the goodbye with a ferocious rumble, she disconnects the call and sets the cordless phone aside. The rice and seafood dish she concocted earlier is probably drying out in the oven. She made up the recipe herself, as she often does, based on ingredients she happens to have on hand. Sometimes the results are disastrous, other times sheer brilliance. This risotto-ish, paella-ish concoction will most likely fall somewhere in between. Although, given her appetite, the hot glue would probably taste delicious right about now. Shouldn't Andre be home by this time? What time is it, anyway? Annie never knows and usually doesn't care. She hasn't owned a watch in years, and the only clocks in the house are on the microwave in the kitchen and the nightstand upstairs. Too lazy to leave the screen porch with its view of the dunes and the Atlantic, she glances at the sky. The sun set a while ago, and it's getting dark. Today is the longest day of the year, isn't it? The summer solstice? Or was that yesterday? Or tomorrow? Annie frowns, as uncertain of the date as she is to the time. Sometime in mid-June, that's for sure. She meant to busy. Oh my gosh, I can't read today, guys. She meant to buy a calendar back in March when she saw them on clearance in whites, but it slipped her mind. Boring organizational things always seem to slip her mind. Oh well. It's safe to say that it's past 8 o'clock, summer solstice or not. Andre should have been home a while ago. He called after he got in from fishing earlier and said he was stopping by the beach for a swim before heading home. That should have taken him an hour, maybe a little longer at the most. Annie shrugs off a chill that has nothing to do with the ocean breeze and the fact that she's wearing only a bikini top and shorts. Her husband has been known to lose track of everything while he's in the water. What if... Nah. Annie reminds herself never to watch Jaws again, even if the only other viewing options at 3 a.m. are decades-old sitcom reruns and infomercials. Shaking her dark curls, she turns up the radio again, having muted the volume before making her call. She smiles, hearing the opening chords of an old Todd Rundgren song. She and Andre saw him in concert a few summers ago when she was pregnant with Trixie. She likes to tease Andre about his affinity for 70s pop music, everything from Rundgren to Barry Manilow to disco. Hello, it's me, Annie sings along with Todd. She selects another shell, this time the delicately sculpted interior of a whelk. She squints at her masterpiece, deciding where it should go, then squirts more hot glue onto the wreath frame. Mommy! She looks up to see Milo standing in the doorway in his pajamas, his tattered blue blanket trailing from one hand. His green eyes, the same translucent sea glass shade as Annie's, blink sleepily above freckled sun-pink cheeks. He's always wiped out after a day at the beach, poor guy. She shouldn't have promised him that he could stay up until Daddy gets home. Can you fix my cape? He asked, hiding a yawn behind his little hand. Sure, come here. Annie quickly plunks the whelk into the rapidly setting dab of glue, then turns to help her son. Why don't you go up to bed, buddy? I want to see Daddy. I have to tell him about my tooth. Annie smiles, tucking one edge of the blanket into the back of his pajama top at the nape of his neck. Milo lost his first tooth today. He almost swallowed it, but Annie saw bright red blood against the white flesh of the apple he was munching and realized what had happened. The tooth was safely rescued from his mouth and is already under his pillow waiting for the tooth fairy. Okay, you can wait up, Annie promises, finishing with the blanket and bending to kiss his tousled, sun-streaked brown hair. Thanks, Mommy. Is my cape back on? Yep, you're all set, Superman. I'm Batman, he protests. Oh, right, I almost forgot. Annie grins, watching him fly out of the room, arms straight out in front of him. Cape flapping behind. Milo has been one superhero or another on a daily basis for a few months now, ever since Andre rented the Spider-Man DVD and let him stay up late to watch it. Isn't this too scary for a 5-year-old? Annie had asked, poking her head into the living room to find father and son cuddled on the couch, munching popcorn riveted by the action seen on television. Nah, he's fine. He was fine. Milo, unlike Trixie, doesn't have nightmares. His younger sister has been waking up screaming on a regular basis, pretty much all of her 3 years. When she was an infant, the pediatrician told Annie and Andre she was probably just hungry or colicky or teething, but when she failed to outgrow it, he informed them that it was night terrors. She'll probably grow out of it, Dr. Blythe promised. So far, she hasn't. Night terrors, poor Trixie, Annie thinks, perusing the array of shells scattered across the table. At least by day, her daughter is as happy-go-lucky as the rest of the family. Yep, life is good. Married to her college sweetheart almost 10 years, living in a seaside town where they both make a living doing what they love, with a boy and a girl and a roof over their heads. A leaky one, but nothing's perfect. Annie figures her life is about as close as you get to that. In spite of, or perhaps because of, her contentment, she can never quite shake the sense that it could all be snatched away in a heartbeat. Especially now, with Andre late and no word. Knowing she's a worrier, he always calls to check in when he's been delayed. Well, maybe he stopped by their spot for a while. Did he have the metal detector in the truck when he left this morning? Probably. He keeps it close at hand these days, certain he's closing in on the treasure he spent years searching for on a lonely, rugged stretch of coast called Copper Beach, not far from here. You're searching for buried treasure? Annie asked incredulously when he first told her. A more logical woman might have dismissed him as a Looney Tune, but not Annie. She was captivated by Andre's tale of a ship that wrecked off the coast 150 years ago, carrying a fortune in gold. According to Andre's grandfather, one of the sailors managed to haul a chest full of doubloons off the sinking ship and rowed it to shore. He buried it in a secluded spot near a stand of Copper Beech trees, hence the contemporary name for the place, but died before he could ever retrieve it. Even Annie, gullible as she tended to be, had to ask, "What proof do you have that this ever even happened?" "My grandfather told me," Andre replied, and his grandfather told him. For Andre, that's proof enough. The Harlow family goes back many generations to the seafaring days of eastern Long Island. There is much a part of this place as the boulders, tide pools, and surf. Whenever Andre has spare time, he's out there on the beach combing the sand and rocky crevices and roots of the trees with his metal detector. Sometimes Annie and the kids go with him. They like to fantasize about what they'll do when Daddy finds the treasure. Money can't buy the most important things in life, Annie always feels obligated to caution. No, but it can buy time. Time and freedom. Time and freedom to be together, babe. There's nothing more important than that. True. It seems as though their entire relationship has been about craving togetherness. If they had more money, Andre wouldn't have to leave the house in the wee hours of the morning to head out to sea on his commercial fishing boat, usually just as Annie is crawling into bed after a long night of working on the handicraft she sells at boutiques. "Why can't you come to bed early and get up early with me?" Andre likes to ask, though he knows her reply by heart. "Because I'm not a morning person. I do my best work at night." When Andre's feeling romantic, which he typically is, he'll reply to that with a corked eyebrow and a suggestive, "Oh yeah? So do I." Annie exhales through a puffed-out lower lip, blowing the sticky tendrils of hair from her forehead. It's muggy for June and for this time of night. Time to put the air-conditioning units in the bedroom windows. She'll have to remember to have Andre drag them out of storage this weekend. She hates to hit him with a lengthy to-do list every time he turns around, but there's always so much to keep up with around the house. There's something money can buy, she thinks, shaking her head. A handyman and a maid. "Come on, Andre, where are you?" she mutters, poking through the pile of shells. Suddenly it occurs to her that he might have found the treasure. Maybe that's why he's so late. Maybe he's loading doubloons into the truck bed. Annie grins, picturing her husband tossing shiny gold coins gleefully into the air. Nah, too far-fetched, even for her wild imagination. People don't actually find pirate treasure on Long Island in this day and age. As she strains for the familiar noise of tires crunching on gravel that announces the arrival of Andre's truck in the driveway, Annie's ears capture instead an unsettling sound. At first it's more faint than the crashing surf in the distance, but it quickly grows louder, closer. A siren. Annie stands with a razor clamshell poised in her hand, head cocked, listening. The siren passes, and she pictures the ambulance racing along the highway a few blocks from the house, headed east. It can't go far. There are only a couple of miles and relatively few houses between here and the spot where the tip of Long Island's South Fork gives way to the Atlantic. A couple of miles, a few houses, and the stretch of coast where Andre likes to surf, and Copper Beech. Annie's heart races. Something's wrong. She can feel it. "Calm down, babe," she can hear her husband saying. "Don't let your imagination carry you away." "I can't help it," Annie retorts, using the back of her wrist to shove a black curl away from her face. "Imagination is my forte." She frequently says that to Andre, and he always grins and agrees. Imagination is her forte. Her best friend, and occasionally her worst enemy. When she was pregnant, every abdominal twinge was the start of a miscarriage. When one of the kids got their first case of the sniffles, it was a potentially deadly respiratory infection. It's not like she can chalk up all her worries to a common case of novice maternal anxiety. If anything, her imagination has grown more vivid over the years. Whenever their old house creaks in the night, she's certain it's a ghost or a serial killer on the prowl. If a mosquito bites her, she's convinced it's carrying West Nile disease. It's almost enough to make her wish for the uncreative psyche that ran in her family until she came along. Almost. When you come right down to it, Annie wouldn't trade her unconventional life for the lives of her staid and stable 9-to-5 Upper East Side dwelling older brothers or her widowed remarried father, now retired to a microcosm of golf and bridge in Boca Raton. She'll take a weathered 3-bedroom Montauk cottage, a treasure hunter fisherman husband, a superhero son, and a night terror-plagued daughter over anything the rest of her family has. Give her flexible self-employment and freedom any day, even if it comes with a vivid imagination and a tendency to imagine all sorts of unlikely scenarios. Like Andre being eaten by a great white shark while swimming, Annie should never have doused her clams with so much hot sauce at dinner last night. A wicked case of heartburn led to wee-hour channel surfing, which led to Jaws, which led to her being deathly afraid for her husband's safety now, which of course is ridiculous. Andre is at home on and in the sea. He grew up out here, grew up sailing, swimming, surfing. He's fine. Of course he's fine. He'll be home soon, Annie promises herself, ignoring the chill creeping along her spine as she goes back to her hot glue and her shells. I kind of want to continue reading it, but at the same time, I'm not sure. So this is like a maybe. You put a maybe pile in front of my slippers. Sorry, my phone goes off so much. It's ridiculous. Don't even know what it is. Not important, not important, not important, not important, not important. Audiobook TBR. Okay. Not important. None of it's important, so I don't even know why it goes off in the first place. Alright, give me 1 second. I'm going to break for a minute. And then we'll get to The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. I will say now is a good time to grab a snack, a drink, sit back and relax, listening to somebody who reads a lot but is not good at reading out loud. So I do apologize in advance about that. But this will get an idea of a first chapter or prologue and see if you actually want to read it or not and what my thoughts are on it. Also, like and subscribe if you like this kind of content. Helps me with my channel. Alright, so The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. I heard that this is like a fantasy. Yeah, it's a fantasy. So we'll see how this goes. I'm not really big on fantasy, but I've heard so many really good things about this, and I'm very curious. I did take a sneak peek in the first chapter. There is no prologue, but the first chapter is only 10 pages. So it's for those who have been with me since the beginning. Look at what we made. Thank you. Oh dear, Linus Baker said, wiping the sweat from his brow. This is most unusual. That was an understatement. He watched in rapt wonder as an 11-year-old girl named Daisy levitated blocks of wood high above her head. The blocks spun in slow concentric circles. Daisy frowned in concentration. The tip of her tongue stuck out between her teeth. It went on for a good minute before the blocks slowly lowered to the floor. Her level of control was astounding. I see, Linus said, furiously scribbling on his pad of paper. They were in the master's office, a tidy room with government-issued brown carpet and old furniture. The walls were lined with terrible paintings of lemurs in various poses. The master had showed them off proudly, telling Linus painting was her passion, and that if she hadn't become the master of the specific orphanage, she'd be traveling with the circus as a lemur trainer, or even have opened up a gallery to share her artwork with the world. Linus believed the world was better off with the painting staying in this room, but he kept the thought to himself. He wasn't there to engage in amateur art criticism. And how often do you, make things float? The master of the orphanage, a squat woman with frizzy hair, stepped forward. Oh, not often at all, she said quickly. She ran her hands, eyes darting back and forth. Perhaps once or twice a year? Linus coughed. A month. Silly me. I don't know why I said a year. Slip of the tongue. Yes, once or twice a month. You know how it is. The older the children get, the more they do things. Is that right? Linus asked Daisy. Oh, yes. Once or twice a month and no more. She smiled beatifically at him, and Linus wondered if she'd been coached on her answers before his arrival. It wouldn't be the first time it had happened, and he doubted it'd be the last. Of course, Linus said. They waited as his pen continued to scratch along the paper. He could feel their gazes on him, but he kept his focus on his words. Accuracy demanded attention. He was nothing but thorough, and his visit to this particular orphanage had been enlightening, to say the least. He needed to jot down as many details as he could to complete his final report once he returned to the office. The master fussed over Daisy, pulling her unruly black hair back, fixing it in place with plastic butterfly clips. Daisy was staring forlornly at her blocks on the floor as if she wished they were levitating once more, her bushy eyebrows twitching. Do you have control over it? Linus asked. Before Daisy could open her mouth, the master said, Of course she does. We'd never allow her to. Linus held up his hand. I would appreciate, madam, if I could hear from Daisy herself. While I have no doubt you have her best interest in mind, I find that children such as Daisy here tend to be more forthright. The master looked to speak again until Linus arched an eyebrow. She sighed as she nodded, taking a step back from Daisy. After scribbling a final note, Linus capped his pen and set it and the pad of paper back in his briefcase. He stood from his chair and crouched down before Daisy, knees groaning in protest. Daisy gnawed on her bottom lip, eyes wide. Daisy, do you have control over it? She nodded slowly. I think so. I haven't hurt anyone since I was brought here. Her mouth twisted down. Not until Marcus. I don't like hurting people. He could almost believe that. No one said you did, but sometimes we can't always control the gifts we're given, and it's not necessarily the fault of those with said gifts. That didn't seem to make her feel better. Then whose fault is it? Linus blinked. Well, I suppose there are all sorts of factors. Modern research suggests extreme emotional states can trigger instances such as yours. Sadness, anger, even happiness. Perhaps you were so happy you accidentally threw a chair at your friend Marcus. It was the reason he'd been sent here in the first place. Marcus had been seen in hospital in order to have his tail looked after. It had been bent at an odd angle, and the hospital had reported it directly to the department in charge of magical youth, as they were required to do. The report triggered an investigation, which was why Linus had been assigned to this particular orphanage. Yes, that's exactly it. Marcus made me so happy when he stole my colored pencils that I accidentally threw a chair at him. I see. Did you apologize? She looked down at her blocks again, shuffling her feet. Yes, and he said he wasn't mad. He even sharpened my pencils for me before he gave them back. He's better at it than I am. What a thoughtful thing to do, Linus said. He thought about reaching out and patting her on the shoulder, but it wasn't proper. And I know you didn't mean him any harm, not really. Perhaps in the future we will stop and think before we let our emotions get the better of us. How does that sound? She nodded furiously. Oh yes, I promise to stop and think before I throw any more chairs with nothing but the power of my mind. Lina sighed. I don't think that's quite what A bell rang from somewhere deep in the old house. Biscuits, Daisy breathed before running toward the door. Only one, the master called after her. You don't want to spoil your supper. I won't, Daisy shouted back before slamming the door behind her. Linus could hear the little pitter-patter of her footsteps as she raced down the hall toward the kitchen. She will, the master muttered, slumping down in her chair behind her desk. She always does. I believe she's earned it, Linus said. She rubbed a hand over her face before eyeing him warily. Well, that's it then. You've interviewed all the children, you've inspected the house, you've seen that Marcus is doing well, and while there was the incident with the chair, Daisy obviously means no harm. He believed she was right. Marcus had seemed more interested in having Linus sign his tail cast rather than getting Daisy into any trouble. I don't know about this one. This one's weird. My cat fell fell asleep on the bed. It's so cute. Linus had balked, telling him it wasn't his place. Marcus was disappointed but bounced back almost immediately. Linus marveled, as he sometimes did, how resilient they all were in the face of everything. Quite. I don't suppose you'll tell me what you're going to write in your report, Linus bristled. Absolutely not. You will be provided with a copy once I've filed it, as you know. The contents will be made clear to you then, and not a moment before. Of course, the master said hastily. I didn't mean to suggest that you. I'm glad you see it my way, and I know Dakami will certainly be appreciative as well. He busied himself with his briefcase, rearranging the contents until he was satisfied. He closed it and snapped the locks in place. Now, unless there's anything else, I'll take my leave and bid you. The children like you. I like them. I wouldn't do what I do if I didn't. That's not always how it is with others like you, or rather the other caseworkers. He looked at the door longingly. He had been so close to making his escape. Clutching his briefcase in front of him like a shield, he turned back around. The master rose from her chair and walked around the desk. He took a step back, mostly out of habit. She didn't come any closer, instead leaning back against her desk. We've had others, she said. Have you? That's to be expected, of course, but they don't see the children, not for who they are, or only for what they're capable of. They should be given a chance, as all children should. What hope would they have to be adopted if they're treated as something to be feared? The master snarled. Adopted? He noted his eyes. Something I said? She shook her head. No, forgive me. You're refreshing in your own way. Your optimism is contagious. I am positively a ray of sunshine, Linus said flatly. Now, if there's nothing else I can show myself. How is it you can do what you do? She asked. She blanched, as if she couldn't believe what she'd said. I don't know what you mean. Work for Dakami. Sweat trickled down the back of his neck into the collar of his shirt. It was awfully warm in the office. For the first time in a long time, he wished he were outside in the rain. And what's wrong with Dakami? She hesitated. I mean, no offense. I should hope not. It's just that... She stood from her desk, arms still folded. Don't you wonder? Never. Linus said promptly. Then, about what? What happens to a place like this after you file your final report? What becomes of the children? Unless I'm called to return, I expect they continue to live as bright and happy children until they become bright and happy adults, who are still regulated by the government because of who they are. Linus fell back into a corner. He wasn't prepared for this. I don't work for the department in charge of magical adults. If you have any concerns in that regard, I suggest you bring it up with Dakama. I'm focused solely on the well-being of children, nothing more. The master smiled sadly. They never stay as children, Mr. Baker. They always grow up eventually. And they do so using the tools that one such as yourself provides for them, should they find themselves aging out of the orphanage without having been adopted. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to catch the bus. It's a rather long trip home, and I don't want to miss it. Thank you for your hospitality, and again, once the report is filed, you will be sent a copy for your own records. Do let us know if you have any questions. Actually, I do have another. Submit it in writing. I look forward to it. He shut the door behind him, the latch clicking in place. He took a deep breath before exhaling slowly. Now you've gone and done it, old boy. She'll send you hundreds of questions. I can still hear you, the master said through the door. Linus startled before hurrying down the hall. He was about to leave through the front door when he paused at a bright burst of laughter coming from the kitchen. Against his better judgment, he tiptoed toward the sound. He passed by posters nailed to the walls, the same messages that hung in all Dakami's sanctioned orphanages he'd been to. They showed smiling children below such legends as "We're happiest when we listen to those in charge," and "A quiet child is a healthy child," and "Who needs magic when you have your imagination?" He stuck his head in the kitchen doorway. There, sitting at a large wooden table, was a group of children. There was a boy with blue feathers growing from his arms. There was a girl who cackled like a witch. It was fitting, seeing as how that's what her file said she was. There was an older girl who could sing so seductively it brought ships crashing onto the shore. Linus had balked when he'd read that in her report. There was a Selkie, a young boy with a fur pelt resting on his shoulders, and Daisy and Marcus, of course, sitting side by side, Daisy exclaiming over his tail cast through a mouthful of biscuit. Marcus grinned at her, his face a field of rusty freckles, tail resting on the table. Linus watched as he asked her if she would draw him another picture on his cast with one of her colored pencils. She agreed immediately. "A flower," she said, "or a bug with sharp teeth and stinger." "Ooh," Marcus breathed. "The bug. You have to do the bug." Linus left them be, satisfied with what he'd seen. He made his way to the door once more. He sighed when he realized he'd forgotten his umbrella once again. He opened the door and stepped out into the rain to begin the long journey home. Interesting. This one is a definite. I will be reading that. It sounds really good and it deals with children, and I guess that's like one of my weak spots is when there's children involved in books. It almost sounds like a creature version of Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, and I think I'm kind of liking that little aspect. It's got the witch, the little werewolf thing, the siren, so I think I'm going to enjoy that one very, very much so. Give me 1 second. Okay, next we have A Likeable Woman by May Cobb, author of Summer Darlings. Looks like this. This has been on a radar of mine for a while. It does have a prologue, and then it's got 6 pages for a chapter, so this one goes super quick. And then we have 2 more after this, so this is going to be a little bit of a longer video, possibly like an hour-ish, maybe a little longer. Here we go. Bear with me. My finger's stuck. My finger is stuck. Damn fake nail. My fake nail got caught. Alright. It's night, nearly 11 and pitch black on the street. Elsewhere in the neighborhood, streetlights cast golden pools of light across the pavement, but not down here on the edge of the circle, near the entrance to the woods. I can barely see my shaking hand in front of my face, but it's so cold out, my breath clouds white in front of me, and other than the wind, which rattles through the tops of the pines, it's quiet and dark. So dark. Good, she can't see me, but I can see her. Through the chain link, which is strangled by vines that should have been weeded a long time ago. She probably thinks it looks so cool. Through the silver net of fencing, I see the white wooden shed. The light is on inside. She's sitting at the table. My blood boils at the sight of her. Her hair draped around her face made up like a horse. She thinks she can get away with anything. Well, she's about to learn that I'm putting an end to that all tonight. Is it a guy? Chapter 1. Kira. Mid-morning sunlight winks through the glass slat windows, but I'm still lying in bed, the black paper invitation shouting at me from across the room. It's sitting upright, resting atop a stack of junk mail on my wooden cafe table, where it's been since Friday evening after I retrieved it from the mailbox. 20 years and still going strong. We'd be delighted if you'd join us. Chad and Genevieve Greer, as we retie the knot with a vow renewal ceremony. Saturday, October 15th at 6 p.m. The Walters Farm, 7328 Evergreen Road, Longview, Texas. Please RSVP by September 15th. The envelope it came in, black on the outside, blood red on the inside, is gashed open, the tiny RSVP card peeking out like the tip of a cat's tongue. I can't pull it out yet and mark attending or not attending because I can't decide. Of course, Genevieve wants to throw herself a bash. She's always been attention-seeking, and from the group text I've been ignoring since Friday night, it's clear that it's not just the ceremony itself, but a weekend full of eye-rolling events she has planned for us. Friday night at the bowling alley, kids welcome. Saturday morning, ladies brunch at the farm, no doubt some farm-to-table BS, followed by crafts of some sort, WTF are we 5 years old, ending with a spa day, complete with manis and petties and a wine tasting. The guys, of course, gets to do the fun stuff on Saturday, canoeing, archery, and duck hunting, chased with a private uncorking of a local distillery's batch of bourbon made exclusively for the occasion. I'm certain the entire event will be just a giant band-aid on what has, from all accounts, been a very nasty marriage. But it's not just the spectacle that's making the pit of dread in my stomach expand. It's the prospect of having to go home again, a place I fled over 20 years ago after I lost her, Mom. I returned only the one time for my father's funeral. All eyes were on me the entire day to see if I would shatter. I'm the fragile one, the potentially unstable one, just like her mother. They shout whispered. And also, I'm the only one who believes my mother was murdered, that she didn't die by her own hand. I put acres of Auburn desert land between me and East Texas, moving as far west as I could without plunging into the Pacific. But every so often, especially for events like these, East Texas tugs at me, threatening to yank me back to its pine-soaked atmosphere and engulf me. Just reading the invitation has landed me in bed for virtually the entire weekend, especially because of the venue. Alright, next we have Red Rabbit by Alex Grecian. It is a Kansas Notable Books State Library of Kansas. It's got an award on it. This one, I don't... there's a saddle, but it's going to be a bloody ride. I looked, it's got like a 5-page and then a 3-page chapter, so... It has a cast of characters, the Posse, Bergen County, and On the Trail. So that's kind of interesting to me. There's a cast of characters before you even get into the book. So the Posse, you have Moses Burke, a former Union soldier and field surgeon, Ned Hemingway, his best friend, Tom Goggins, a self-professed witch hunter, Rabbit, a mysterious child, Rose Nettles, a former schoolteacher, Joe Mullins, her husband, a farmer, and Benito Cortez, a wanted outlaw. Then Bergen County, you have Sadie Grace, accused of witchcraft, Andrew Keene, a widower, Duff Duncan, a cowboy from the Paradise Ranch, Sarah Cookson, Sadie's ally in the nearby town of Riddle, Big Bill Cookson, her husband, Ruth Cookson, their daughter, Willie Cookson, their son, One Finger Finley, a saloon keeper, John Riddle, the proprietor of the Bird and General Supply in Riddle, Henry Crenshaw, the proprietor of the dry goods store in Riddle, and Elizabeth Crenshaw, his wife. And on the trail, you have Charlie Gamble, a Texas deputy sheriff, the huntsman, a mysterious tracker, and traveling horse renowned Apache scout. Ubel Crane wrote the book on killing witches, and Miss Bradshaw, Rose's mother. So, interesting. Okay. Oh, then you have In the Woods, you have Ghost, Mr. James and Hannah, The Red Ranch, Rigby and McDaniel, traveling companions who claim to be U.S. Marshals, Isaiah Foster, a ghost. My phone is going to irritate me. Then Quivira Falls, you have Miss Bender, the proprietor of the inn, John Jr., her son. Peter runs a telegraph office with Hiram, missing an arm. Hiram runs a telegraph office with Peter, missing a leg. So Peter's missing an arm, Hiram's missing a leg, Peter's missing a leg, Hiram's missing an arm, and Madeline Russell is a ghost. And then in Buckridge, you have Earl Hickman, the sheriff of Bergen County, and Roy Olin, his deputy. And in the Paradise Ranch, you have Teddy Paradis, the rancher, Walt Traeger, a young ranch hand, Wayne Traeger's twin brother. Then you have Bill Cassidy, Matt Hawk, Jim Garber, and Johnny Barth, other ranch hands. Okay. I don't know. That's a lot. They buried the girl next to her mother on the first warm day of spring. The trapper, Colin Stoll, had come by the previous evening and volunteered to help. He spent the night in an old rocking chair by the hearth and was already marking out a rectangular site in the yard when Andrew Keene stumbled out of the little house the next morning, pulling suspenders up over his narrow shoulders, the effects of drink still visible under his eyes. Colin finished clearing the area of stones, and Andrew handed him a hoe. "It sure is a pretty day, though. Listen to them birds chirp." Andrew said nothing. He jabbed the tip of his shovel into the dirt and turned it, dislodging a clump of brown prairie grass. Yeah, sure is nice out here, Cullen agreed with himself. And a good thing, since it looks like we'll be all day at this. It had been a harsh winter, and the earth resisted their hoe and shovel, but they were determined to get the girl in the ground before nightfall. They worked silently for an hour and had dug a shallow trench 5 feet long by 4 feet wide when Andrew stopped and used his shirt sleeve to mop his forehead. He got Cullen's attention and pointed out a horse in the distance. They leaned on their tools and watched as the horse drew near. A gray roan with a black nose and a cropped tail. Cullen recognized the rider as Duff Duncan, a young hand from the Paradise Ranch. Interesting. When he reached them, Duff dismounted and tied the roan to a scrubby brush 10 yards away. There was a wooden cross marking a fresh mound of dirt a few feet from where Andrew and Cullen were digging. Duff took off his hat and nodded toward the cross, paying his respects to Andrew's wife, Mary, who had passed away before the first real snowstorm of the winter. He put his hat back on and circled the grave. When he held out his hand, Andrew gave him a shovel. With 3 of them, the work went quickly, and by early afternoon they had dug down 6 feet. They stopped, and Andrew brought a bucket of water from the house, along with some biscuits left over from the day before. They sat with their feet dangling in the hole and ate. Andrew passed around a bottle of corn liquor, and each of them took a pull or two. When they had rested, they went to the barn and carried Olivia's box to the gravesite. None of them cared to view the body. Cullen had not been there for her last days, but he had heard rumors back in Riddle. Rumors about how Olivia's bones had broken and re-knit themselves in bizarre configurations, how her flesh had run in rivulets across her wasted muscles, then solidified again in peaks and troughs, scales and horns. He hoped her face had resumed its human features in death. At least he preferred to imagine that. Andrew drove in the final few nails, and they looped a rope around the box, lifted it over the hole, and lowered it in. Andrew was not able to speak, and Duff pulled his hat down over his face so it fell to Cullen to perform some sort of ritual. He had never learned to read, but he had attended many funerals, and he had heard women speak from their good book. He did his best to remember their words. Earth to earth and dust to dust, Lord, we commend this little girl to you and ask that you take her into your bosom and soothe her innocent spirit. Set her to dancing in the fields of your bounteous afterlife and reunite her with her sainted Mother Mary. And we also ask you to keep her there, nevermore to do herself or us no harm. It ain't ours to question your mysterious ways, nor why you took her the way you done, nor why you let bad things happen. But now we thank you for releasing Olivia from her pain and suffering, and we pray it was for the betterment of us all. Amen. He shot the others a bashful glance and was pleased to see Andrew nod. They passed the corn liquor around again and filled the grave. When they had finished, Andrew set up a wooden cross identical to the one he had fashioned for Mary's grave. Sorry. He held it in place while Duff smacked it with the head of a shovel, driving it into the ground. They tramped over the site, packing down the earth, and the other 2 men followed Andrew up to the house. They sat on the porch and watched the sun move lower in the sky and finished off the liquor. I ought to move along, Cullen said when he saw the bottle was empty. Ain't a good idea to travel alone after dark. You could sleep in that chair again tonight. Well, I'd be grateful. That chair's a sight better than blanket under a tree. Andrew nodded again, and the matter was settled. Duff looked away across the yard toward the new grave. She would have been old enough to marry in another month. She told me last fall at the dance she'd choose me when the time come. Way you was sniffing around here, I figured you too, and maybe her mother was up to something along those lines. Well, I loved her, Andy. I loved her too. She was always a good girl. What the hell happened? She ruined everything. For a confused moment, Cullen thought he was still talking about poor Olivia, but then Duff went on. Sadie Grace did this. You know damn well she did this. He waved his hand at the horizon to show he was talking about more than Olivia's death. The others looked out at the stunted corn stalks that hadn't come up with the previous spring, at the dead trees that marked the property line between Andrew's farm and the Paradise Ranch, at the 2 fresh graves. Andrew shook his head, and Cullen stood up and walked off from the porch a little ways. It was bad luck to mention Sadie's name. He stuck a hand in his pocket and touched the 7 copper coins he kept there. 7 was a magic number and a good ward against witches. I know we ain't supposed to say it out loud, but we're all thinking it, and I just don't care anymore. Andrew rose to his feet with a grunt and went inside the little house. He came back out with another bottle of corn liquor and unstoppered it. He handed it to Duff, who took a long pull. Cullen ambled back toward the porch, his eye on the bottle. Ought to watch your tongue. I guess I'm to blame. I got that witch riled at me, and this was the price I paid. Hell of a price. I was too damn proud. If I'd given her some respect, that corn would have come up and you might have got the chance to marry my girl after all. Well, I'm going to get her for this. I'm going to kill her, Andy. I'll do it for Olivia and for your Mary, too. Cullen angled back away from the porch and walked farther out into the yard, putting some distance between himself and Duff, just in case. In town, they claimed Sadie Grace could hear her name spoken, even from 100 miles away. It was also said that she'd lived in the same cabin outside Riddle for as long as there had been white people in Kansas. It's a Kansas book. That's cool. Oh, gosh. That she wouldn't ever die and she couldn't be killed. Andrew nodded, and he kept on nodding like he was thinking about something he found agreeable, but was maybe arguing with himself about it anyway. After a while, he stopped nodding and took the bottle away from Duff. I think she went too far this time. She went way too far, and it would be good if she was to bear some responsibility for this. She's got a little piece of herself in everything around here. Little hooks in me, and you, and the land. It's how she got inside marrying little Olivia so easy. He closed his eyes and raised the bottle to his lips, but lowered it without taking a drink. But Duff, there's not a damn thing you or me could do to her, not on our own. But we'd need some help, Andrew said. You've been thinking on this already, haven't you? You talking about a bounty? Cost us some money, I guess. Enough to tempt folks who ain't from here and got no ties to the land. No way for her to hook into them. Duff said something in reply, but Cullen was already running away from them across the yard, and he couldn't hear what Duff said. He hurried to the barn and got his mule and rode away from Andrew King's farm as fast as that mule could go. Cullen Stoll wasn't a stupid man, and he didn't court trouble. Part 1. Kansas. This is literally like 3 pages. Word of the bounty on Sadie Grace spread quickly. $1,000 to any man who could kill the notorious witch of Bergen County, Kansas. Ned Hemingway eventually heard about it all the way down in Oklahoma, below the Cherokee Strip. Skeins of honking geese were returning north, and the black oaks and river birches had begun to turn green by the time Ned crossed the border into Kansas. He was riding with Moses Burke out of Texas, and they were taking their time, not especially interested in finding fresh employment until their funds ran out. Moses was vaguely interested in visiting a cousin of his in Nicodemus, and Ned thought he might go along to satisfy his curiosity about the place. After that, they discussed the possibility of circling back south to Dodge City, but it was an idle thought and susceptible to change depending on their whim. They stopped over in Monmouth to give their mounts a rest and to play a hand or two of poker. It was late in the day, and Moses was holding 2 aces and an 8 when the saloon door opened and an old man limped into the makeshift saloon. He had a shock of white hair that stuck out in all directions from under his hat, and he was carrying a child's body over his shoulder. He dumped the child on a table, then stepped back and addressed the room. By that time, everyone in the place had set down their drinks and their cards to gawk at the new arrival. The women stood up and moved toward the staircase in case the old man meant to stir up trouble. She got my boy. The witch got my boy. Moses stood and pushed his chair back, abandoning the excellent hand he'd been dealt. He brushed past the old man and bent low, putting his ear to the child's chest. Get away from him. You ain't fit to touch him. This child isn't dead, but his arms out of the socket, and if he won't wake up, there could be something wrong with his head, too. What do you know about it? The old man said. Moses grabbed the child's arm with both hands, braced his foot against the table, and pulled. There was a loud pop, and the table shook beneath the tiny body. The old man started forward, but Ned put a hand on his shoulder and spun him around. My name's Hemingway, friend. Ned said. He let the old man go and rested a hand on his shoulder. My partner here is Moses Burke. He learned some medicine in the war. Not on my side, he didn't, the man said. He glanced down at Ned's hand on the butt of his gun, up at Ned's eyes under the brim of his yellow cattleman, trying to size up his odds. I don't doubt that, sir. Moses is particular about the company he keeps. In fact, Moses had served under Dr. John Degrassi in the 54th Regiment out of Massachusetts. Dr. Degrassi, the only black surgeon to have treated Union troops, had chosen Moses and 4 other volunteers to help him in the field. In the following months, Moses had learned enough medicine that Ned sometimes thought his friends should have stuck with it if there were a hospital that would take him on. I think this child will be all right. That arm will hurt for a bit, but it should heal fine. I'm more worried about the head wound, and there's something else that doesn't sit right with me, but... Moses broke off and shook his head as if arguing with himself. He caught Ned's eye and motioned for him over to the far end of the bar. Ned followed but kept an eye on the stranger who was now hovering over the small body on the table. Excuse me. Regardless of what this man claims, Moses said in a low voice, that child is not a boy. You sure? As sure as I can be. You think this fellow's lying to us? Ned said. I can think of a few reasons for that. Not all of them sinister. Or it could be he's not lying. Ned likes to look at things from all angles. In which case he doesn't know that's a little girl he's slinging around like a bag of beans. Might be worthwhile to ask him some questions, Ned said. One of the women had fetched a damp cloth from behind the bar. She folded it in half and laid it on the child's forehead while another woman pushed the old man toward the bar where the saloon-keeper set out a shot of whiskey. The old man accepted the drink and swallowed it in one gulp. Next round's on me, Ned said. What's your name, old-timer? Tom Goggins, the old man said. Of the Omaha Gogginses, if you're familiar. Well, I've never been there, Ned said, but why don't you join us, Tom of the Omaha Gogginses, and tell us what this is all about? What it's about, Tom said, is a witch. Interesting. I don't know. I'm having a hard time figuring that one out, because I think I need a little more context, so that's another maybe. Oh my gosh. Sorry guys, I'm struggling right now. I have circulation issues and everything. I'm going to be getting to the doctor here in the next couple of weeks when they have an opening. But I'm going to be getting into the doctor. I need to. My legs and arms are going numb and tingly feeling and everything. So every once in a while I'll be doing this with my fingers trying to wake my hands up. So I do this a lot. I move around a lot. I move my knee a lot. Everything's just kind of falling apart now that I'm 31. Oh, man. Oh. Alright, we got one more book. One more book, guys. I can do this. Maybe go this way. Oh, my knee. Don't get old. That's all I gotta say. I need a minute. Hold on. Definitely pull something in my knee. But yeah, with this Red Rabbit, I just need a little bit more context on it. I do like that it takes place in Kansas. I don't find very many books that do take place in Kansas unless I get them from the Kansas or specifically at my library. So that's really cool that this has a lot of Kansas talking. I like that it has a premise of witches, but I don't like that children are dying. That's one thing I don't like. Alright, and the last one we have is The Striker by Anna Huang. My damn phone. The Striker by Anna Huang. This is a newer one. It's got this really pretty art right here. So, there's that. Don't get into stuff. You were laying down sleeping. It's got a playlist. So High School, Taylor Swift, Applause, Lady Gaga, Smooth Operator, Sadie, London Boy, Taylor Swift, Who Do You Think You Are, Spice Girls, Piece of Me, Britney Spears, Paparazzi, Lady Gaga, Delicate, Taylor Swift, Can't Get You Out of My Head, Glimmer of Blooms, It's Gonna Be Me, NSYNC, Into You, Ariana Grande, Love Letter to Japan, The Bird and the Bee, Unstoppable, Sia, Iris, the Goo Goo Dolls, Let Me Down Slowly, Alec Benjamin, Sweet Caroline, Neil Diamond. It's got a content notes. Contains explicit sexual content, profanity, and topics that may be sensitive to some readers. For a detailed list, scan the code below so you can scan this code and you can get all the content warnings. There's an author's note. Takes place in London, so it uses the British term football instead of soccer. Unless otherwise stated, football as it's used here also refers to soccer, not American football. Please also note that certain details about the Premier League schedule have been modified for story purposes, and the word for posterior will remain in its American instead of British form. Apologies to the word arse. It's not you, it's me. Alright, so it's like 8 pages. So here we go. Asher. I didn't get performance anxiety, but there was nothing like 70,000 people watching you get fucked that really put a guy on edge. Sweat dripped into my eyes as I received the ball from the left winger. The crowd's cheers reached a fever pitch, and a tiny prickle of trepidation snaked through my gut. Usually the fans' enthusiasm revved me up. After all, I had dreamed of moments like this growing up, playing on a professional pitch, hearing thousands chant my name, being the one who took my team to glory. Moments like this meant I'd made it and proved my critics wrong, which I had many times over. After all, I was Asher fucking Donovan, but today, in the last minute of the Premier League season final, I felt like just Asher, the newest and most controversial transfer to Black Castle. It was my first season with the team. The match was tied, and we were second on the league table, behind Hull-Chester United. We needed a win to take home the championship, but so far, the match had been a clusterfuck of disasters. An intercepted ball here, a missed penalty there. We were all over the place, and I could practically see the championship slipping through my fingers. Frustration mounted as I tried to maneuver past the swarm of Hull-Chester defenders. Bochy, Lyle, Canoe. I knew their tricks well, but they also knew mine. That was the problem with playing against your old team. There was nowhere to hide. With no way out, I passed the ball to another forward and tried to ignore the numbers ticking down on the clock. 40 seconds, 39, 38. The ball bounced between players until, through a stroke of equally good and bad luck, Vincent gained possession through a counterattack. The cheers dulled to a low roar beneath the weight of my anticipation. 17, 16, 15. I was in the perfect position to receive the ball. I had a clear shot at the goal, but I could see Vincent's eyes searching the pitch for anyone else to pass it to. My pulse hammered in rhythm with the ticking clock. Come on, you bastard. There was no one else. I was the only player on our team who could feasibly score at this point. Vincent must have come to the same conclusion because with the noticeable clench of his jaw, he finally kicked the ball to me. The crowd's excitement pitched high, but it was too late. Vincent's precious few seconds of hesitation gave Hull-Chester an opening, and they stole the ball before I could connect with it. A collective groan rippled over the pitch. I blinked away the sweat and tried to focus, but my old team's taunting stares and the blaze of bright lights disoriented me in a way I hadn't felt since that match many moons ago. 5. An attempt to steal the ball back failed. 4. Flashes of news headlines and TV snippets blurred in my head. Traitor, Judas, sellout. Was I worth the record £250 million transfer, or was I the most expensive mistake in Premier League history? 3. By some miracle, I got the ball on the second attempt. 2. No time to think. 1. I kicked. The ball went wide to the shrill of the final whistle, and the stadium fell so silent I could hear the rush of blood in my ears. All around me, my team stood stunned while the Hull-Chester players jumped and whooped in celebration. It was over. We'd lost. My first season with Black Castle, the one where everyone expected me to bring home a championship, was over, and we'd lost. My surroundings blurred into a muffled stream of noise and movement, and I barely felt the soreness of my muscles or teammates' consoling slap on my back. I barely felt anything at all. No one spoke during our walk to the changing room, but the dread was palpable. The only thing worse than losing a match was facing Coach afterward, and he barely gave us a chance to sit before he went off. Frank Armstrong was a legend in the football world. As a player, he was famous for his string of hat tricks in the 90s. As a manager, he was famous for his innovative approach to leadership and his hair-trigger temper, the latter of which was on full display as he laid into us. Are those the standards you play with? Are those the fucking standards? Because I'll tell you, they're nowhere near championship level. They are fucking shit. Lack of focus, terrible teamwork, no cohesion. He touched on all the issues that had plagued us since I transferred in mid-season, and it didn't take a genius to know why. Even as Coach berated us, head swiveled between me and Vincent, who sat on the opposite side of the room. Team dynamics have been fucked since I joined. Part of that was natural consequence of incorporating a new member into a tight-knit club. A larger part boiled down to the fact that I, the league's top scorer, and Vincent, the club's star defender and captain, despised each other. We played different positions, but our rivalry was infamous. He was the only true competition I had for press status and sponsorships, important things in our world, but the biggest source of our contention was what happened at the last World Cup. The dive, the fight, the red card. I tried not to think about it. If I did, I might punch him in the face, and I doubted Coach would appreciate me doing that in the middle of his rant about teamwork. DuBois! Donovan! My head snapped up at the sound of my name, and Vincent's did the same. Coach had apparently ended his speech because the rest of the team was shuffling off to change while he glared at us. My office! Now! We obeyed without argument. We weren't stupid. Do you want to take a guess as to why I called the two of you specifically in here? Coach didn't wait for the door to fully close before launching into part 2 of his rant. Vincent and I remained silent. I asked you a question. Because we lost? I said, my stomach tightening at the word lost. Everyone hated losing, but today's loss stung particularly hard for me when I knew there were people actively rooting for me to fuck up at Blackcastle, namely Holchester United fans who hated me for transferring to their biggest rival. I'd had plenty of naysayers growing up, teachers who thought I'd never amount to anything, football fans who thought I was a flash in the pan, press who dug for dirt in every aspect of my life, and I couldn't stand proving my critics right. No, it's not because we lost. It's because you two are the ones the rest of the team looks up to the most, but you've let your stupid rivalry affect your game. Worst of all, it's affecting moral. We slunk lower in our seats beneath his glare. I knew there would be a transition period, but I thought you would get over it and work things out because you're adults. However, it seems like I'm dealing with children because here we are, post-season, and we have nothing to show for it except a lot of mistakes that could have been easily avoided if you'd learned how to bloody work together. Coach's voice rose with each word until it was loud enough to seep through the walls. The muted chatter from the locker room noticeably died down, and a flush of shame crawled across my face. Coach's disappointment was almost as unbearable as losing the championship. I'd idolized him growing up, and the opportunity to work with him had been a major factor behind me handling in my transfer request. This had not been how I'd envisioned ending our first season together. Vincent shifted beside me. Coach, don't get me started with you. What the hell was that in the last 20 seconds? Donovan was right there. You should have passed him the bloody ball when you had the chance. See opening, pass ball. It's football 101. Vincent's mouth tightened. He couldn't say what we all knew. He hadn't passed the ball immediately because he hadn't wanted me to score the winning goal. The press would have replayed the kick over and over, and I would have received all the glory that came with it. Vincent wouldn't have been able to stand it. Selfish prick. I didn't dwell on whether I would have done the same had I been in his place. Coach's stare sharpened. He'd been a club manager long enough to figure out Vincent's motivations without him verbalizing it. Since you want to act like children, I'll treat you like children. Normally I have off-season training up to the individual players, but not this summer. This summer you're both cross-training at the Royal Academy of Ballet together. What? Vincent and I exploded at the same time. My sense of self-preservation couldn't override my shock at Coach's edict. Clubs almost never dictated the specifics of how we spent our off-season. Players hailed from all over the world, which meant summer was their chance to go home, see their families, and train as they saw fit. I already spoke with RAB's director. She's on board. I didn't say anything before because I wanted to see if you two could pull it together by the last match and fucking win. You couldn't, so you'll be taking private lessons with the same instructor for the summer. She's one of their best, and she has an intimate knowledge of football. You'll be in good hands. I didn't want to be in any fucking hands except my own. I had nothing against ballet, though I never cross-trained using its techniques. I knew players who had, and they sang its praises for improving their strength, flexibility, and footwork techniques. However, I'd already created my training plan. I didn't need a stranger jumping in and telling me what to do. Vincent straightened his face, taking on a ghostly pallor. Don't tell me your instructor will be Scarlett Dubois, Coach offered a mirthless smile. You're welcome. Dubois, as in Vincent's sister? You're joking. That's a conflict of interest. I had never seen or met Vincent's sister, though I'd heard him talk about her. The two were close, which was just my luck. I didn't need the Dubois siblings conspiring against me together. I don't want to train with my sister. No. It's a good thing neither of you has a say in the matter. The volume of Coach's voice dropped back to normal levels, though it was no less cutting. The director assured me she's the right person for the job and that she won't let personal ties affect her work. I believe her. That means you two will train with Scarlett, and you will take it seriously. And gentlemen, he pinned us with a warning glare, when you return, you'd better convince me you're goddamn capable of working together instead of against each other, or you'll be riding the bench. I don't give a shit if you're the captain or the top scorer on the team. Understand? Yes, sir, we muttered. Coach's mind was made up. There was nothing we could do or say to get out of it, which meant I was stuck with the Dubois siblings for an entire fucking summer. My jaw tightened. I didn't know how much Scarlett Dubois, but given she was related to Vincent, I knew one thing: I wasn't going to like her. At all. Oh, but you might actually like her. So, yeah. That is the last book I have to do a little try chapter with me. So for sure, these two will definitely be read. I like this one because of the fantasy. It feels like a Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, but with creatures, so that's going to be fun. And, magical realism, which I'm not big on, but I was big on in Peregrine's Home, so... And then this one, I just like the whole learning about, everything, and he's going to be stuck with two people he doesn't really care for. These three, on the other hand, I need to do a little bit more reading. This one, I feel like I might like, but I might not like, maybe in an audio form. This one, I'm more on the fence of not really liking. It just sounds boring to me. And this one, I feel like I've read something like this before, so we'll have to give these another shot, another chapter, and see how that goes. But I'm not going to do that on camera with you guys. We're already over an hour into this video. If you stayed with me this whole time, I would really appreciate if you, shoot me a message down in the comment section. I read all my comments. I respond to most of my comments if it's a respondable comment and things like that. Or if it's just, you're doing a great job. I'm not just going to sit there and say thank you all the time. Yeah, I need to refill my water. I'm almost out of water. I have a few more videos that I need to get done and things I need to clean and do. I need to organize my shelves. That's another thing. And clean my room. But I'm starting to get heartburn. But I hope you enjoy this video. If there's a book that you are interested in, let me know in the comment section down below. I love knowing what everybody's interested in, what they think is going to be like a total flop. I hope that this is the type of content you guys like. With all that being said, I'm starting to get heartburn and chest pain. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.